both sides of the conversation, family. We welcome you to this virtual space crafted especially for you. My name is Jada Curry, and I'm both sides of the conversation's marketing director and graphics design specialist. I want to take some time to ground us all as a community into this space we are about to open up in, so let's go through our community standards. Both sides of the conversation is providing a safe and honest space for open conversation, so we ask that you all be respectful of that. We also ask that you be respectful of each panelist, host, and participant. We do encourage healthy debates and conversations. Don't personalize anything with anyone. This includes name-calling, bullying, trolling, or shaming. This will not be allowed or tolerated. Your perspective is yours. It is not a prescription. You do not have to agree, but show respect. These community standards apply to all of our live shows and any virtual spaces that we hold on social media, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We want to make sure that we are caring for each other as a community. This is our priority in all of our endeavors as both sides of the conversation. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's show and continue to stay in touch with us via YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or all of them. All right, thank you for listening and see you soon.
Welcome, everybody, to both sides of the conversation. I'm John Henry, Executive Director. Today is Thursday, so you all know what that means. We're going to have another Educational Thursday presentation, and tonight we got a phenomenal brother coming on to talk about sickle cell, bringing some awareness and education and information to our community. So we are excited about that tonight. But before we get to tonight's presentation and introducing tonight's presenter, we got to go through a couple of our community announcements. First, I just want to say my allergies is killing me, okay? The pollen in the air is driving me nuts. So if you guys hear me sniffling and you see my eyes watering, I'm not crying. I'm just dealing with these allergies, and they are hitting me hard. Even though we've been having some pretty nice weather here in the Bay Area, the pollen count is high, and my voice and everything is just being affected. So be patient with me, but we're going to definitely get through today's segment. Also, just want to say to community, we have some phenomenal things that are coming up. We just excited. We have some phenomenal folks coming behind the scene that's going to be coming on to help uplift and move this organization forward. We got some content creators, and we got an amazing co-host that's going to be joining us. Community, you are going to be excited. I am excited just to be able to work in space with such a phenomenal individual. I'm not letting the cat out the bag, but we're going to have a phenomenal host joining us to help host these shows and come do some community work to give back to community. So we're excited about that. And we got some other things coming on as we continue to move forward, as we continue to uplift our community and continue to do the things that we are doing to impact our community. So we are excited. More news is coming. But again, we're just moving forward, stepping at the pace that our ancestors are calling us to. With that being said, it is still Women's History Month, so we just want to continue to salute and uplift the amazing, amazing queens that just have been doing some amazing stuff. And today I was a part of a healing circle, a family circle of some powerful individuals. And let me just tell you, we have some amazing queens that are doing some amazing things to impact our community. And just a lot of healing going on right now. It is just a lot of time of healing, rejoicing, and things taking place in our community. So just excited to see folks coming together. We got some amazing events that's coming up. So the folks in San Francisco, get ready. We got some amazing things that's going on in San Francisco. So just excited. But also with all that going on, just want to remember to uplift and keep our community folks in prayer. As you all know, the tornado had went through the Gulf Coast, affecting a lot of our folks down in New Orleans. And we just want to keep those families encouraged, uplifted in prayer, and any support that any of our community folks can, make sure that we reach out and support them. Also, there's been tremendous loss in our community from just violence, community loss. And we just want to make sure that we uplift our community leaders, our community folks, up in prayer, as so many people are dealing with family loss, community loss, and it's just trying times as we transitioning here, coming out of this pandemic. We already have lost tremendous loss during this pandemic, and just want to make sure that we uplift and keep those folks in prayer and keep them encouraged as families are dealing with it. So just wanted to put that out there as well. Also, lastly, you all know Sister Jackson, Honorable Sister Jackson, the judge that's running for the highest court of the land, is going through the Senate process. And on this History Month, to be acknowledging to be the first Black woman sitting at the highest seat of the land has just been a remarkable process to watch. But definitely I want to give a shout out to Senator Booker because as he humbly gave that sister so much praise, and just to see the emotion from both of them and just interacting in that space, just a great way to see an African-American male lift up an African-American woman in that manner at that time, at that place, was historic. So if you all didn't catch that clip, we're going to share it out on our social media handle. But go back and look at the addressing of Senator Booker to the new federal judge. I think it was powerful. I think it was something that our young folks, community folks needs to see, because I know the narrative out there. Black men don't uplift and support Black women. So just to see that in that moment was beautiful. And I think that's just a big part of this narrative shift. Of changing how we engage, uplift, and support each other in community. I just thought that was something phenomenal. So I wanted to put that out there as well. Also, 10 years later, as we remember Trayvon Martin, the activist mom was on Gayle King just talking about the pain of the loss of her son. And we won't never let the acknowledgement and praise of the young brother, Trayvon Martin, who was killed. This thing is still very touchy for a lot of folks in our community. Just to understand the magnitude of what that did to this country and how it changed socially, it's tremendous, to see this thing play out the way it have over the years. But again, the work continues, and just nice to see that his name is still being uplifted and not forgotten about at all. And like I said earlier, we was talking about the families in New Orleans. As you all know, the Twister tornado went down there and knocked out a lot of power and did some damage. A lot of folks are unhoused. There's still businesses and folks without power. So just make sure you're checking in on your loved ones and family and praying for those folks down there in New Orleans. Also, some of the community announcements that's coming up. All that watch Tuesday, we had Brother PJ come on from the Alpha fraternity, and they having their show tomorrow at 345 Stockton Street. If you want to get tickets, please check out the website. The information we'll post again for the event that is happening. Also, the day of exploration, exploring the Eco Center at Heron Harry Park is happening March 26th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It is a beautiful, beautiful place back there, and some of the work that they're doing with our young folks in the community. Go check out the Eco Center back there. Check out some of the space in D10 out at the waterfront and see some of the things that they have going on. Pretty cool, amazing stuff. They're going to have some food and some other science demonstrations that's going to be taking place, and they're going to show people how to navigate the walking trails and some of the things that they have going on out there. So that should be a great event. Also, the kickoff event is happening for the CEV mobile unit that they'll be coming to 1652 Sunnydale Avenue from March 28th, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. They're going to have food, jumpers, and different things of that nature to talk about some of the resources that they're going to be able to provide for a community. And then on the 29th, they're going to be at 2600 Arcelius Walker Way, which is the Alice Griffin housing location there, better known as Double Rock for folks in San Francisco. So they're going to be out there the next day from the same time, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So it should be a great event. Again, food, jumpers, activities for the kids. But come check out the mobile unit, see some of the resources that they are bringing to community folks. Also, Brother Dante King is going to be doing some of his stuff for his book, The 400-Year Holocaust, Coping with the Reality of Anti-Blackness. That's going to be taking place April 13th, 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. It's going to be a Zoom webinar. We're going to reach out to Brother Dante, get that information, and share it out to community folks if you want to be a part of that Zoom webinar. We'll get the information out to community. Also, the Fillmore Fest is happening. That's provided by the YMCA Collective Impact. That's going to be happening April 12th through the 26th. And then May 10th and May 24th from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. at Ella Hill Hutch. That's at 1050 McAllister Street. So if you want to be a part of that, get some of that good food that they're going to be putting out, please stop by. Again, we'll be putting up more information on it. But again, in the 2 dates will be April 12th and April 26th. And then again on May 10th and May 24th at 1050 McAllister Street. That's going to be at the Ella Hill Hutch Center and the Fillmore. Also, for both sides of the conversation announcements, again, we're still looking for support as we continue to build capacity for this organization. You can support us by choosing us as one of your charitable organizations on Amazon Smile. If you have an Amazon account, Google search Amazon Smile. You can sign up and select both sides of the conversation as one of your charitable organizations, and you can support us. No extra cost to you, but when you purchase something on Amazon, after so much support, Amazon will then send some support to both sides of the conversation. So that's one way that you can support. Also, you can go to our website at any time, click the donate support button, and definitely all of those supports will be very appreciated. And we thank all of our supporters and folks who continue to support the work that we are doing as we continue to build and move this organization forward. Also, this Sunday coming up, we're going to have a powerful conversation with Rafiki Coalition. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to be talking about some of the suicide and things that's taking place in our community. I think this is a very, very important conversation. So hope community will be able to tune in and be a part of this conversation as the number of suicide rate has been increasing in our community, some of the mental health, depression, and anxiety in our community. So it's just good to be back in space with Rafiki Coalition, and we have some phenomenal guests that's going to be helping facilitate that conversation. Next Tuesday, we'll have another one of our hidden gem segments as we will continue to highlight our Black and Brown businesses as well as our Black and Brown organizations and leaders of the community that are doing positive things to impact our community. As you all know, tonight's Educational Thursday is about sickle cell and sickle cell awareness. And Brother Faron is here. We're going to bring him up, introduce him to the community so he could jump into tonight's presentation. Excited to have him back for this conversation, as this is a very important topic to be discussing as sickle cell is impacting our community every day. So with that being said, we're going to bring up Brother Faron Doss. Welcome back to both sides of the conversation. Happy to have you back and come to bring that education and awareness to our community, brother.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do too. Appreciate you.
Right on.
So how you want to start?
Well, go ahead and introduce yourself to the community, give them a little background on you, and then we can jump into tonight's presentation, brother.
All right, cool deal. So Faron Doss, retired Army Sergeant First Class, 24 years in military. Been retired now 8 years. Sickle cell trait, I believe, is my gift. I was born to have this conversation. I collapsed in the military caused by sickle cell trait exertion with rhabdomyolysis. If you hear that in the military or athletes, people have died from that condition. I was able to survive that. I had most of the symptoms except for the cardiac arrest. And so the military found me not fit for service after I went through some treatments and come to realize that my body had broken down from some skeletal muscular disorders and some joint damage. And being on arthritis and some arthritis medication, I was no longer fit for service. So they medical retired me. Through my depression and anxiety is how I discovered this conversation. Like I said, I believe it's God's gift, because if you really believe that we're born for a reason, you're born for a conversation. And so I also just want to share that sometimes those things that happen to us that seems like they're a negative, they could become our testimony. So just look in your life to see, to discover that conversation that you can have with people. Sometimes I feel like this is not an important conversation, but then when I realize that people are still dying from sickle cell trait exertion, babies are still being born by having two parents with sickle cell trait and having a child with sickle cell anemia or sickle cell disease, it reminds me that, yes, I need to speak out. And so I get to do that. I am on the radio myself, KCA Radio 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM out in the Inland Empire, San Bernardino County. So I'm on Sunday nights at 8 o'clock. I'm also co-hosting a show on Dash Radio on God's House of Hip Hop. There's a channel powered by Dash, and that's the Revolution Radio Show. So that's Sundays at 5 o'clock. So Sundays is my radio show days. And I speak as well. So if you want information, again, farond.com will give you all of the information about my personal journey. And then the WDC on sct.org is my Sickle Cell Trait Foundation, where we focus on the risk factors and some of the conversations we're going to have tonight. So again, blessed to be back here on the both sides of the conversation, giving you some sickle cell trait conversation. Thank you.
All right, I'll pull up your presentation right now. It's up, and you can go ahead and start running through it.
All right, so tonight I'm going to give you just some basic facts about sickle cell trait. This is my actual personal story about what happened to me that morning. I was in the military when I collapsed, and I use this when I speak to doctors and nurses. This is my case study format. And so, again, as you see, Faron Doss, retired sergeant first class, sickle cell trait, and the case study is from 2006 when I collapsed. So the pretty much the overview of this is I was at Camp Roberts, California, which is Central California. It was September 2006. I was at the age of 36 at the time. It was about 6:30 in the morning, and the weather was overcast, and it was around 50 degrees. I was at my Master Sergeant Academy. Back then they called it ANOC. Completing this course, I would have been eligible on the promotion list to make Master Sergeant. So I was an E7 at the time, working on my Master Sergeant rank. And this was the school that I have to attend to pass this to be able to be on the promotion list for E8. It was around my 17th year, and we do that exercise test twice a year. So it wasn't the first time that I took that exercise test. And then also the exercise test for the military consists of the push-ups, sit-ups, and the 2-mile run. And at that age, I had 1721 to pass. So what I was wearing that morning, I was in my full PT gear with the jacket and the sweatpants. I had completed the push-ups and the sit-ups. And a mental note is we're trained to sprint that last lap, right? And so when I was coming around that last turn, I could hear the instructor, 1545, 1546. So I'm like, okay, I'm doing pretty good. Again, I need 721 to pass, and I'm in the high 15s, almost 16 minutes. But again, I'm trained to sprint that last lap. So I take off to sprint, and I did feel like this electrical charge sensation come over my body when I started to sprint, but I didn't think anything of it. Came across the finish line in 16 minutes, put my hands over my head to get air in my lungs, all the things that we're trained to do as we complete that Army test, fitness test. At the end, I started to feel nauseated. My muscles felt weak. Everything was kind of spinning. My peripheral vision got dark. So I didn't pass out, but I kneeled down and I closed my eyes. I lay back. And when I opened my eyes, everything was spinning like 1,000,000 miles an hour. The medics came and got me. Of course, they rushed me down to the local hospital in Twin Cities, and there the doctor brought me into the back, gave me a couple IVs, and came back and asked me if I ever had kidney problems. I says, no. He says, what do you do now? And then he walks out. He comes back in and he says, you know what? It's just a freak accident. It's probably heat stroke, dehydration. So we're just going to give you another IV. Take the rest of the day off and you should be fine. So I go back to the barracks. I go to sleep. I wake up somewhere around 2:30 and my symptoms are worse. Everything is still spinning. I'm throwing up. Nothing would stay down. I almost crapped on myself. Still having that severe muscle fatigue. And so I just made it back to my bunk and I went back to sleep. So when they rushed me back to the hospital that night, the night doctor did some more tests and that he saw that my renal failure, where my kidneys were at 50% each. So what the doctor saw in the morning was actually the beginning of the renal failure process. And so they checked my creatinine kinase levels, my CPK levels, And at that time, they were over 12,000. Normally, for my age at the time, they should have been around 150. So imagine they're at 12,000 and rising, and I'm experiencing renal failure with both kidneys at 50% each. So I was dying on the inside and had no idea that there was a condition they called rhabdomyolysis, which is a skeletal muscular disorder. Anybody can experience rhabdo, and we can talk about that later, that people who overexert themselves, if you've heard about CrossFit, people have done too many exercises and it doesn't give their body a chance to recover, and their muscles or extremities swell up. And again, rhabdomyolysis by itself can be fatal because it's releasing toxins into the bloodstream and again causing the renal failure because those toxins hit the kidneys. The kidneys can't filter those toxins, plus the myoglobin from the muscles, and so the body starts to break down, and then the kidneys fail. And in worst case, you've heard people have cardiac arrest and they have heart attacks and they pass away. And a lot of times the parents don't know, or the athlete didn't know, that they were sickle cell trait carriers and that the sickle cell trait could cause sudden death. And so they're doing a lot of studies around that conversation to find out why some of us with sickle cell trait experience these complications and some don't. Not everybody's going to experience, but these are some of the things that are possible, especially if you are an athlete or you exercise and you overexert yourself. It's possible that these could be some of the signs and symptoms. So what the night doctor did was he put me on IVs. I ended up spending 4 days in the hospital, flushing my kidneys to get those CPK levels down. And I was sent home after the 4th day. I remember that third, like the 3.5 day mark, I was finally able to get up out of the bed and walk to use the bathroom on my own, holding the IV machine because I just had severe muscle fatigue and damage. And so I went back home to my regular doctor, and he monitored me for about 2.5 years. I exercised on my own pace, but what we discovered was when I started to get on the treadmill, it felt like I just got off a roller coaster ride. And so after his studies and our agreement that I couldn't run anymore, we agreed that we would submit the paperwork and I would probably just get a profile. The military has other exercises that we can do to pass the test, like the bicycle or the walk. And so I turned that paperwork in, and the military found me not fit for service, and they flagged me, so I couldn't carry a weapon, I couldn't deploy, I couldn't do anything until they went through this medical board process. Now, at this time, I still have no idea it's sickle cell trait connected. Right now, my diagnosis is the rhabdo. I had no idea what rhabdomyolysis was, so I didn't even think about that. All I knew was that my body was breaking down and I could barely walk. I happened to be on the base one day, and the officer that I served with during the war in 04-05, I was a platoon sergeant. He was a platoon leader for a POL company, and we were training soldiers how to survive the car bombs and things like that before they went overseas. I passed him on the base almost 5 years later, and he's like, "How you been?" I'm like, "Man, you don't want to know." He's like, "No, tell me." I'm like, "Man, I could barely walk. My muscles hurt. My legs hurt. I'm doing these mental health appointments, and now I think I'm getting depressed and all this stuff." And he's like, "You know what? Something like that happened to me where my muscles locked up. But I have sickle cell trait. So I have to drink extra water, take these vitamins." Now, this is 2010. I collapsed in 2006, and I'm dealing with my health. And out of this conversation of him sharing his experiences kind of related to mine and having sickle cell trait, that triggered my memory. And I'm like, why does that sound familiar? And then I remembered in 1999, I took my second physical in the military. I was 29 years old, and the Air Force base that I was connected to found my sickle cell trait and some blood work. And they called me in a panic, like, "You need to come back to the clinic." And I'm like, "Okay." So I go back to the clinic, and they're like, "Do you know you have sickle cell trait?" I'm like, "No." "Well, we just want to let you know, make sure you don't mate with another person because you can have a child with sickle cell disease." I'm like, "Wait, hold on. It's not sickle cell disease?" He's like, "No, you're just a trait carrier. You shouldn't have any problems." Now, this is 1999. I remember I have a cousin, Nigel, with sickle cell disease. He's like, "No, it's not the disease. You're just a carrier." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm done having children anyway, so that chapter's done." And I thought no more about it at 29 years old. I transferred out of state, went about my military career. And here we are from 99 to 2006. I'm when I collapsed. And then in 2010, I hear this conversation from my old officer about sickle cell trait. I go back in and I get a copy of that test result from 99. And sure enough, it said positive sickle cell trait AS. I took that to my rheumatologist because I was dealing with arthritis at the time. And so she did another sickle cell trait test. Hemoglobin electrophoresis is the test. And sure enough, positive sickle cell trait. And we discovered that 40% of my red blood cells were the S gene. So if you're a sickle cell trait carrier, you can actually find out what percentage of the S gene that you carry. And so when they did that, then we were able to do some research. And that's when I found that military from the late 70s, 80s, they were finding out that people with sickle cell trait had collapsed and were dying back in the 70s and 80s. And then I saw in the athletic world where athletes playing football, running track, basketball, boxing, MMA fighting, like all these different sports, people have also collapsed and died. And just regular people, you know, hanging out at the gym or skiing have collapsed and died from sickle cell trait complications. And so putting those all together, it started to make sense of what happened to me. And then that's when the military took that paperwork and found me not fit for service. And in 2013, I was medical retired and my career came to an end. And like I said, in the midst of depression and anxiety and wanting to take my life, you know, God put some people in my life and they put me on this path, exposed me to some conversations about sickle cell trait, and I became this advocate. And I found my what's next. You know, a lot of times for us as military personnel, there is an identity crisis. But even in people, like we all deal with some kind of identity crisis. And so what I realized was my whole identity was in my rank. It was in that camouflage. And so when that was taken away, I didn't know who Faron was. And so I had to rediscover what was I going to do? Who was I going to be? And this sickle cell trait conversation came in and I became an advocate. So this last 12 years, I've been focused on sickle cell trait awareness, mainly the trait. The sickle cell trait, for me, has its own separate awareness, education, and prevention than sickle cell because, again, there are risk factors around sickle cell trait that haven't been talked about in the medical community or in our sickle cell trait community. And so those two worlds do connect when we start talking about having children and having people tested for sickle cell trait. So those two worlds do connect at the level of testing. But for me, sickle cell trait has its own separate awareness, education, and prevention conversations. And so that's what I get to bring to this conversation about sickle cell trait. There is no competition between the trait and the disease. It's like which one came first, the chicken or the egg. Well, we know that sickle cell trait, both parents have to have that trait and pass that trait to the child to be born with sickle cell anemia or a type of sickle cell disease, which we can talk about later on. Today, I'm still dealing with my sickle cell trait exertion symptoms. I live in a pain 5, 6. I really don't complain unless it's a 9 or a 10. I have arthritis pretty much in my joints and still deal with managing my depression and anxiety as well. And I can tell you that once I discovered my health condition, I had a conversation with my mom, and I remember being like 5 years old and my left arm would ache like crazy. And I remember them taking me to the doctor and the doctor saying that, oh, he's 5, he's having growing pains. Well, guess what? My mom said I was 2 years old and I would be crying as a baby about my arm. And so again, as we're starting to find out more about sickle cell trait, if it's benign or not, some people with sickle cell trait do have pain crises. They do have complications. And so that's the conversation that we have to bring now to the table so that our people with sickle cell trait can be taken care of. There are 300 million people globally that live with sickle cell trait. United States, they say about 3 to 4 million people live with sickle cell trait. It became so important that the NCAA for college athletes, they made it mandatory for all student athletes to be tested for sickle cell trait or sign a waiver. It doesn't matter what color skin you are, what sport you're playing, male, female, they all have to have a sickle cell trait test to play sports. Why? Because college athletes have been collapsing and dying from playing football, preseason sports, trainings and things like that. And so they took the liability off the school because the parents were suing the schools. So now the NCAA put it back off onto the families. So that child either signs a waiver or does a sickle cell trait test. Even then, there's lack or short conversations about why that person needs to have that test done, the impacts of it. So there's still like breaking communication around the education piece, the awareness piece. Even more so in most states now, newborn screening is done. So if you have a child now, most children are being tested for inherited genes, genetic complications, and things like that. Even with sickle cell trait, there's a disconnection between that letter getting to the parents and then that parent getting genetic counseling about that child's inherited gene. So even at that point, there's still a level of breaking communication around parents being aware of their child having sickle cell trait because it's not the disease, right? So I remember when my daughter, youngest daughter, was born, I got a letter from the hospital saying that she was a trait carrier. Now, this is before I even had my physical, right? So again, even after my physical, I didn't put two and two together, had no idea, read that letter, put it in the drawer, and never thought nothing else about it. And even after I collapsed and found out it was a trait carrier, I had to go to my dad, who at that time was 60 years old, who had forgot that he was a trait carrier. So none of these conversations had been passed down, except that knowing my cousin Nigel, who had been living with sickle cell disease since I was a kid. That's as much as I knew about sickle cell. So again, it's very important, and I would be willing to answer any questions, whether it's here that you put in the comments, or if you reach out to me at wdc.scet.org or my social media platforms. I spoke to a family today about their daughter having some complications in the sport that she plays. So it is things that are happening, and it is very important that people get this information, not just the genetics, but also for their health, because there are some, there's a kidney cancer that's connected to sickle cell trait. There's other health complications. And so people need to know about this gene that they're carrying. So again, I'm here to answer any questions, and I appreciate your time.
Wow, phenomenal stuff. You want to take? I'll take down the presentation.
Yeah.
Hey, very, very important presentation. Thank you again, for coming on, bringing this awareness and information to our community. These are the tools and information that we need to help educate our community and do some of the preventative things that we need to do so that we're not walking into these disasters or no one else is collapsing or nothing happened. But first of all, I want to say thank you for your service. One of the things here at both sides of the conversation, when it comes to our military folks and family, we always want to salute them and uplift them and let them know we appreciate your service for our folks in the country. So thank you again for that. But yeah, I got a number of questions, for tonight's topic, sickle cell. I've been reading a lot of information. I also have a young cousin who fights and deals with sickle cell. This disease is spreading throughout our communities at an alarming rate. I mean, if you look at what they're saying, it's about 1 of every 365 African American, and I think about the same for Latino community. There's a lot of research and funding going into the community health system to do research to get more information on it. But because this is such a high a disease that's impacting our community at such a high alarming rate, how do we get more folks in our community to, one, understand to go get tested, or how do we put together something so that our folks know this is part of their testing, that they need to be getting checked when they're going to their doctor? Because I think that's missing. I think a lot of it. And then, how do we advocate to get these resources to get them to come in the community, since we are the highest impacted, to come do testing in our community?
So let's talk about that, right? When Do you remember when the Zika virus came out?
Yeah.
Okay,
Early 90s,
right.
yeah.
Remember Zika virus?
Yeah.
Remember there was a couple other ones, but the same type of campaign that they did for the Zika virus, right? You just remember how you just recognize the Zika virus with no problem. Like you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Just like you recognize that kind of campaign, the AIDS type of campaign, the HIV campaign, we need that type of campaign. We don't have that type of campaign. People, when I started talking about sickle cell trait, they was like, oh, I ain't heard that since the 70s. I thought that was eradicated. I thought that was done. I'm like, no. People are still having babies with sickle cell disease. People are collapsing. Like, so the awareness, it just seems to be so odd that they focus on campaigns like the Zika virus and Ebola and all these things that, you ask anybody on the planet, they know about HIV and AIDS. Anybody, you ask a little child, they've learned about HIV and AIDS. So for me, it's like, how do we establish that type of campaign so that it becomes a common conversation, not like, oh, what is that? And so that's the issue that I see, is just the level of campaign. I could have a campaign for the next 20 years that says sickle cell trait is not a Black gene, and maybe move the needle in 20 years, right? Because people have been programmed from the past that sickle cell is a Black gene, and it's all Black people related, so they just disconnect from it. But like you mentioned, the Hispanics is number 2. But you could be Caucasian, Mediterranean, European, Asian descent. It's no longer a color. It's a bloodline because it combats malaria. So depending on where your ancestors are from, we're all blended now. Nobody's just from region one area. So now that we're all blended, you have to know where your ancestors, where your bloodline is from. And people don't have those conversations. So you get with your girl or your guy and you start dating and you have a child, and no one's talked about what's kind of defective genes that you have, or what kind of inherited genes, or what your bloodline, like we don't have those kind of conversations. They're not those common conversations. And so it continues to happen. So how do we create that kind of campaign where, like I just mentioned, the Zika virus, she was like, oh yeah, I remember Zika. Yeah. Well, that's how it needs to be for sickle cell trait and sickle cell.
Man, powerful stuff. And I was going to ask you that, the historical element. And I just wanted to ask you, because, the Black Panther Party was one of the first folks to advocate for sickle cell and do the testing in the community. Do you think that stigma from just folks, how it was attached to the Black Panther Party, do you think that have some of the, some other folks maybe have that negative connotation about?
It was way before them. They did the best that they could because they saw that there was a need. Some people, criticized the Black Panther because the type of testing that they were doing. I mean, at least they made an attempt. But some of the tests that you used, that used back then could give you false positives. It could give you false negatives. But at least they were attempting to make that impact about the sickle cell trait and sickle cell. But yeah, I believe it was way before them. It was way before,
right?
What they did.
Yeah, one other quick question. Just want to throw this out there too. With all of the research, and I know UCSF is doing a big research study on it. How confident are you? Because you live with it, you deal with it. How confident are you of the research and some of the technologies that we have? Stem cell is this new amazing thing that are getting into our research realm. How confident are you of a cure or some kind of breakthrough that you think might happen with all of the investments that's going into sickle cell research?
I have friends who live with the sickle cell anemia and disease, and on my radio show we talk about these conversations. And as a sickle cell trait carrier, I use my platform to help get those conversations out. I can tell you that some people, yes, they want that cure, of course. I can tell you that I have friends who are like, you know what? I wouldn't even take that chance because my body, some people feel like their body has already been impacted to the point where what happens if they do find a cure, and the process that it takes to go through that cure could be even more detrimental to living with the disease. So that's there's a percentage that of course we want that cure so that the future generations can have that option, because it's not universal, right? It's very expensive, but there is no universal cure for sickle cell. But what I share from my perspective is that how you think about the cure process, right? And so we talk about depression and anxiety, right? We talk about the mental health that comes with living with sickle cell. Like we're people, right? They're people that they live with this inherited, you know, gene that they were born with. So there's no like, okay, you can just go, you'll be fine in a couple of days. No, this is a lifelong process. But we're people as well. And so we deal with depression and anxiety like the next man and woman, right? And so my thing is, when you think about the future of the cure, are you living into that future like it's an anxiety for you today, right? Or are you living in that future? They call it the future of uncertainty, is what I'm pointing to. Like anxiety creates that future of uncertainty. So yes, they're working for that cure. They're doing, all these tests and all these, trials. But for the person living with that disease, are you living into that to where it creates anxiety, which doesn't allow you to have peace today, right? Because you're in the future of uncertainty. Are you living for today for your quality of life? And then we're advocating for those cures to be created and discovered. So for me, there's two different views for the mental part of living into the cure and research, because if you live so far into that cure that you create this anxiety today, then your quality of life suffers. And so I have a conversation called quality of life versus a cure. And so I pose this question to people who live with the disease to find out where their mindset is, where their perspective is, and how they talk about the cure. And you can hear some people, they live into that cure to the point of so uncertainty, and then now they're today, it's the quality of life suffers because they're so far into that stress of discovering the cure. So that's for me the mental aspect of it, on how we can start to be at peace today, right? How do we find peace today with a good quality of life, with your medications, with your experiences going to the emergency room? Like all that stuff can be managed today as they advocate for the future of a cure for that next generation.
Wow, very deep. I like how you put that. That was very tremendous how you put that. One of the things when we talking about how do we market and advocate, there's this thing going on in our communities about solidarity. And these type of topics always are touching to me because when we talk about solidarity, these are the type of topics that I feel like, all community folks need to be a part of. When we had these solidarity conversations, it's not just about violence in our community. It's not just about race, social justice. We need to also include, these type of diseases, these type of movements, a part of the solidarity movement, because we really need everybody to be aware and we need to make noise to get the support. But in that, because there is not a lot of support, there is not a lot messaging and things happening. Can you talk a little bit about some of the struggles? And like you talked about the mental health part of it that folks deal with, but some of the struggles a person could deal with so that community also understands. Because I think a lot of times when we talk about bringing awareness to people, talking about the struggles, talking about the disparities, sometimes we just talk about these words and we talk about equity and we're not really giving our community a real picture of why. And what does this equity look like? What does this disparity look like, right? So can you talk about some of the challenges that one might go through, whether it's a family, whether there's a single parent, because there are struggles. And like you was talking about, you was in the hospital for several days, right? But let's look at it from another realm. And like I'm saying, talk to the community about so community can get an understanding why this conversation is so important, not only for our community, but for other folks to wrap their arms around to help move the conversation forward and get the support and whatever funding and whatever medical attention that is needed. Because a family can be impacted dealing with this disease. If you're a single family out there and you're looking for, if you have children, right, getting your children to school, having somebody to care for your children, dealing with, the in-hospital stay experience, right? Just having to be able to be sick and trying to advocate for yourself. So if you could talk a little bit about that, just to give community that view of like also some of the struggles outside of just the illness that you would have to cope with being a patient at that time or dealing with and living with the situation.
So I'll give you from the sickle cell trait, because that's my experience first. even as a trait carrier, because the medical books, they say sickle cell trait, you shouldn't have any complications. You're only a carrier. So you shouldn't have any pains. You don't experience that. The only people with sickle cell experience pain and complications. So again, we're talking about, is sickle cell trait benign or not, right? And when you look at the medical information, even on CDC website, it shared with everything I share with you is right there. People with sickle cell trait, sickle cell trait is not sickle cell disease. It will never turn into sickle cell disease. However, in rare cases, people with sickle cell trait can experience pain, crisis, exertional, sudden death. So then it doesn't make sense. How can you say that on one statement that there's no problem with sickle cell trait, you should be fine, but then, oh, by the way, there are risk factors in rare cases. So who's defining what rare is today? We use that word, they use that word, like a broad stroke of a brush, rare. Well, then who's determined what's rare? I'm a rare case. Is that what you're saying? I'm rare? But then how people are still dying. So even from a sickle cell trait perspective, that's one of the things that we're dealing with as carriers, because it's growing pains. It's not your trait. You shouldn't have problems. So then now you take that from a person who's Hispanic or white, and they're going to the doctor. Now they're in reverse of that, because, well, how can you have the trait? You're Hispanic. How can you have the trait? You're white. How can you have the trait? You're European. Like, you can't have, so the medical community, that's the world that we have to start to take that conversation to, and change some of that literature, change some of those languages, change some of those words, so that people, if you got 4 generations of doctors and they all been taught that sickle cell trait don't have problems, you're going up against generations of information. So how do we get the medical community to start to pay attention to us as trait carriers, to treat the pain, and let's figure out what else is going on later, right? Because people are dying from complications. Now, when you go to our sickle cell community, that's a whole nother subject, because they're living with this disease every day. They live in the level of pain. Their red blood cells are mutating constantly. So now you talk about the conversations that I have with my teammates and my friends, going to the emergency room, waiting in the emergency room for hours with no protocol. If you go into the hospital with a gunshot wound or a heart attack or chest pains, you're going straight to the back. They're checking your vitals, and you're getting care. You walk in, I'm having a sickle cell trait crisis or a sickle cell crisis. All right, have a seat. It could be 2 hours, 7 hours before they even seen by a doctor. And what we need the community to understand is that crisis could be that crisis that takes that person's life, because we can't see what's going on inside our bodies. So to have someone go to the hospital and wait 2 hours, even, like, you have no idea if that crisis is going to be the crisis that takes that person out, right? So the fear of even wanting to go to the hospital, right? So now my friends are taking care of themselves. They're maintaining their pain at home, and they're living into the experience of not being treated right at the hospital. Who wants to go to a facility that's supposed to take care of you? And my friend Dorian, I finally heard him, because I'm like, if you're not a drug seeker, then why were you offended? If I'm not a drug seeker. So if somebody says, "Oh, Faron, you must be here seeking drugs," no, I'm not. But I'm not offended. But I heard him finally, and he said, "I don't want to die in the emergency room." And my heart hurt, because I finally heard what he said. And then I looked at my own life as a veteran. Now, I don't know if you know about veterans, but the VA hospital has a lot of conversations about how we get treated when veterans go to the hospital at the VA. And I saw myself in my own version of that when I need to go to the hospital at the VA, right? And I'm in pain, and I call my doctor, and my doctor won't even let me come in to see him. So I'm in reverse. I don't want to die at home. He doesn't want to die in the hospital. We both have this experience, which is impacting our quality of life, our fear of dying, right? I'm trying to beg the VA to take care of me. Give me something for this pain. Come in, check me out. Let me come in and see you. He's like, no. Call me back in like 5 days. I'm like, 5 days? So when I heard my friend Dorian holler out, he doesn't want to die in the emergency room, man, it hurt my heart, because now I see why the drug seeker conversation is so important, because they're not getting the care at a facility where they're supposed to trust to be taken care of, right? And so there's both sides of that conversation, right? Because you have the medical community who are the nurse and doctor that don't want to risk their license being suspended, right? You have that nurse that don't want to give you that much medication because it's not normal and they don't want to be responsible for your death. So again, you see how the fear of death could play a role in why our treatment is not being taken care of, how the patient feels like it should be taken care of. So we need the community to understand that our community lives with this disease. Yes, they take high tolerance levels of pain medication for years because they've been taking that medication for years. And so they need that much, some medication sometimes just to bring the pain down to maintain it to a level. But most people don't think about that. But you talk about a cancer patient who needs medication, and there's a level of compassion that comes with that, right? So again, you talk about, and I hate to compare, when you compare things in life, one of them is going to be less compared to the other. But I'm not comparing, but the compassion that comes with those other diseases and conversations doesn't seem to be the experience that comes with people who live with sickle cell that are going to the hospital to be treated, right? And so the mindset shift, the fear of death, the fear of losing their license, like there's so many layers to it. You can't just say it's one thing, right? There needs to be a whole nother conversation. People need, the nurses, the doctors need to be educated on sickle cell because it is important. It is a lot of people who have this disease that need, when you talk about the opioid issue and things like that. So yes, there just needs to be a whole nother, again, Zika virus came out and everybody on the planet knew about Zika. If that's the case, it's possible that this sickle cell conversation can have that level of impact so that people, this is the key word, the experience of being taken care of. Not what you're doing for me, right? The activities of you taking care of me, but there's also an experience that comes with that care. And that experience of that care is not there. And it hasn't been there for years. So the human experience is just as important as what we do in life.
Wow. I mean, that's very powerful. I mean, I think you articulated that very well. Community, this is that call to action. And I think these are the conversations we have. I mean, one thing that we learned during COVID is the healthcare system was exposed. A lot of disparities, a lot of issues that's taking place, especially, like you said, when services being provided to the Black and brown community. And again, everybody's data driven. We live in a world where everybody's tracking data. All these Department of Public Health, all these folks are tracking numbers and information. And this is a very important conversation that we need to continue to keep having as they are tracing these information and data, as we start mapping and scoping out areas that are impacted in our Black communities. And we find that these high numbers of cases, how do we get those medical institutions to make sure that type of training, that type of awareness and information is being presented for them to give care in those areas that we know are impacted. I mean, we have technology now to really hone in on that type of data and information and really utilize that, as you said, to be impactful in the community. But I'm always out there, and I'm always advocating when I'm in the hospital setting. And, it's always about that humility and compassion, making sure that our doctors, our nurses understand. And, that was the troubling thing that I always feared about when the opiate crisis took off, that there's going to be somebody out there who needs these medications that's going to be impacted due to the folks who abuse. And this is why I tell people, when we take advantage and we do things in the community, sometimes illegally, it impacts people's lives. You look at what's going on with the PPE loans and all this stuff that's going on, and now people who really need those services, EDD, right? People are being impacted. And then this is why I tell people, sometimes the selfish mindset of one thing, of one person doing one thing, impacts a whole community. But again, that's why it's important to bring in the right nurses, the doctors who are from the community, who look like us, who can serve, to have that humility and compassion and not just get thrown into the rabbit hole as they do so many times to our patients in our community. So there's still a lot of work. There's a lot of advocacy. There's a lot of folks who are speaking up. And again, it takes more people who look like us getting into the fields, being able to support, the community efforts. And that's why when we talk about equity, it's so important in these different jobs and these different careers. When we talk about police, fire, making sure that we have the representatives of the community who look like us in place.
See here, no, I agree with you 100% on that, right? But here's the thing, again, we have to be able to go back to our youth and our children so that they can feel included in those fields, right? So again, there's an experience that comes with, hey, you can introduce me to being a doctor and a nurse, but if my environment teaches me that you can't do that, that ain't for you. You got to go work over here. You got to go get a job over here because you need to make some money. So now you're forcing that child. Their experience is, well, I can't do that, even though it looks like a good career to have. But when they start to hear us and speak to us as children, man, you know how many people we've inspired to go to nursing school? We've inspired people to go to take biology, to do research on, like, it happens when you have these kind of community conversations. People find their level of interest that they thought they couldn't be a part of. So the experience that we have to start having with our children and our teenagers and even our adults, you got to get their mindset that you are already included in this world. You already have an opportunity to become whoever you want, but it takes courage. You might have to do a lot of studying. Like, there's a lot of things that come with that. But if I'm sitting at home and my mindset is, I can't do that, that's the first thing that's going to stop me before I even go and do research to see how long it takes to become a doctor or a nurse or whatever researcher or a hematologist. So how do we get our culture, right, their mindset to shift that I'm included? So I could go and be a hematologist. Yeah. Not because my community says I can't do it. No, because you already are capable. You have the ability. So the mindset shift, I believe, is something at its core that we have to have, because we talk about diversity and inclusion and exclusion. Those are all emotional charges too. It's not just, again, I'm a guy that I've learned about the human experience and the human activities. And that's how I survive or that's how I live every day, because I have to separate my human experience versus the stuff that I do, because my human experience will take me out, right? It'll take me out and I don't want to do this no more because I don't get enough advocacy conversations. Like I could go there with this conversation easy, but then I understand the impact of that and how important it is. So I have to set Faron aside and talk to you as the advocate, right? And if you say no to me, you're saying no to the advocate, not Faron, and I'm okay, because somebody else might have this conversation and be a yes, right? So, but if I deal with Faron's experience as an advocate, I'd have quit a long time ago. So these are the things that if we want to encourage our generations to grow and become, nurses and doctors and whatever, not just basketball players and military and rappers and drug dealers. Like, there are 40,000 jobs that you can get that you already included in, but we have to start shifting the mentality so that they experience being included in these fields, just as not just because, that's predominantly a white culture that does that, or Asian coaches are nurses. No. It doesn't matter. Like, you can be included in that workforce if you choose to be.
Man, that is very powerful. I'm glad you said that, because the human experience, I didn't quit 1,000 times. The advocacy, the fighting me to see the need that our community need, that's what keeps me going. And I'm glad you put it like that. But again, me and you, we have voices, we have platforms, we have a way to get information out. So again, taking that leadership role, but I'm big on accountability. And you are right. Not only the other folks, but within our community organizations, our community leaders, some of our elected officials, we have misled our communities. And I'm glad you said that, because even in our community, sometimes when it comes to job opportunities in the Black and brown community, we always get presented with the janitor jobs, the cook jobs, the waitress jobs, the jobs that's paying minimum wage. And again, when it's presented to the community, it's always jobs. And I keep telling these folks, my people don't need jobs. They need careers.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying? They need stuff that's sustainability long time ago. We live in a nation right now that is transforming, and I need my community to keep up. I don't want to waste my time teaching those young folks how to mop a floor.
Yeah.
I need cybersecurity. We need technology folks.
STEM jobs.
We need STEM jobs.
Yes.
We need nurses. We need doctors. We need lawyers. Okay, that can get in there. We got a system.
Psychologists.
Come on, we need give them careers for sustainability. So I'm glad you said that. I mean, that's where I'm at with it. Because again, you could give anybody a job. Jobs can be traced. When you have careers you can take all over the place.
Yes.
And I really want us to be focus driven on careers. And I posted something the other day about the trades. Let's also support and uplift our folks in the trades and not look down on them because they didn't go to a 4-year college. There's a lot of amazing wages being made in trades.
For real.
A lot of advancement happening in trades. There's a lot of women in the trades who are doing some amazing work. I ran into a lady yesterday. She was an electrician. And I mean, they are making, 6 figures, good 6 figures.
More than doctors.
Right. So we just need to empower our community. And, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm tired of folks in our community. I am sick of it. I'm telling you, Faron, I am so frustrated. And I'm glad the allergies is taking off my voice. So I might start screaming right now. I'm tired of going to these job fairs.
Right.
They come to our community, and I'm going to tell you right now, these jobs are terrible.
Yeah.
They're not even jobs we should be looking at. And it's all data, okay? These folks get these jobs the first 90 days. Most of them are laid off. Most of them are let go. But again, when they put out these job reports, whoa, we had a high number of Black employment.
Exactly.
Give me the sustainability numbers. See, this is why we're talking about data. Numbers don't lie, but they can be skewed, right? Show me the overall picture.
Yes.
Okay. I want to know when these people got hired. I want to do
and being fulfilled in their employment too. You don't want to have to get a job where you gotta act different, and then you get in the car and you're like, whew, I'm cool. Right? You want a job that you're fulfilled, that you could be you when you show up, not like, but don't trip though. The others are doing the same thing when they leave that job and they get in their car. They like, whoo, I'm cool. I can finally be me. Why are we leaving work like that? Why are we leaving jobs like we're not even fulfilled? We're pretending to get along with each other. There's so many layers to that, man. So many.
It's terrible. The corporate model. It's a lot of things that need to be revisited in this country when we talk about employment and careers. But these folks are missing the mark, and I'm glad you said it. I am so sick of the inclusion and diversity talks, like in equity. Like, listen, let's have some action. Let's put some things in play. And again, just like you said, who wants to leave their job and have to feel like if I go to work and speak up, I got the tone police on me. You can't say that. So where do you have true freedom and equity? You know what I mean? What does this look like? This is what I said. Like, we talking about inclusion and diversity, but we don't have prayer hour.
The experience is not there. It's there because they do it, but when it's a different inclusion as an experience is emotional, and that's the part that we haven't dealt with as far as back as I hate to bring up that slavery conversation, but that mentality is still perpetuating the dialogues of some people. And so your experience is upset and frustration. Even if you got a 6-figure job, you're still experiencing upset and frustration because you haven't dealt with that internal dialogue of your own inclusion. Like, hey, like you said, my ancestors, their prayers for me, their prayers are answered. And now it's my turn. Now it's our turn to make sure that when we leave this place, that the kids, the generation behind us could say, man, they did that for us, and now it's our turn. We acknowledge the past, but you don't have to think like the past. And I believe that experience is being carried on and passed on to our generations. So it doesn't matter. You get a 6-figure job, your experience is still upset and frustrated, man. And that's the part that you can't, the workforce can't fix that. Right. We as a culture have to start dealing with ourselves with that conversation.
Hey, well, we in the business of changing the narrative. We in the business of empowering our people.
Yes.
And it starts with brothers like Cory Booker, acknowledging the sisters, uplifting. We got to bring that healing back to our community. We got to do our self-work in the community, uplift our community. It's not always perfect. It ain't always going to be clean. But again, to the brothers out there listening, we got to start getting involved, man. I had a
Yeah.
conversation today, and I'm happy you here. I'm happy you doing your advocacy work. But our black males, we got to do more. We got to step up. I mean, we gotta take some accountability. And some of the things that I'm seeing, and I'm in the community, and I'm gonna tell you, brother, we got some work to do with our black males in our community, and we can't just sit here and point the finger at what the sisters do.
No.
Because they are organizing, they are doing the work, they are taking the brunt of it. This is Women History Month, so I just want to say again, we got some powerful sisters that are doing some things. But black men in America, what are we going to do? We got to step up. And I'm not saying all of us, but there's more than not. We got to start organizing. We got to get together. We got to start moving our community, because the change doesn't happen if the black man doesn't move. And I keep telling these people, you can't heal half of the community.
No.
We invest in everybody else. Our black women get the investment.
Yes.
They get the services. Not saying that they don't need it, but you can't fully heal a community until you heal the other half, and that's the black man. And we got some work out here, brother. And I'm gonna invite you back. We're gonna have
because we need to have that. We need to have that talk, because as I shared with you, my transition to become this advocate, there's a whole nother journey, man, that I had to deal with, that of depression and anxiety of wanting to take my life, that I had to go back and heal my relationship with not just myself, but with my own parents. And so when you talk about the black male and the stuff that we dealt with growing up, right? And you have to look at the disappointments that we experience. Like it's different for us as men. And so the mentality that we can have those conversations to start healing the root issues, right? The root issues, you have to go there and realize that, you know what? My mom and dad, they did the best they could with what they had. Right. As a child, they did the best that they could with what they had. Right. And comparing my life to what you had, it doesn't work that way. Right. And so healing those emotional, silent emotional things, those complex post-traumatic stuff that we deal with. I'm not good enough. I'm not worth it. I wasn't not smart enough. Like all those things as men, we got to go back and deal with that, so that we discover that, oh shoot, that's my truth, but it's not the truth, right? It's not the truth. And once you start to deal with that, then that's where the confidence and courage and boldness comes back into that man. Like, okay, I got this, right? But if I'm walking around again, like I told you as a child, that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not worth it, because of what the environment has taught me, what the environment has told me in the media and in my schools, that you can't do that. Even my parents might be the dream killer. They're telling me, you can't do that. You need to go get a job so you can just survive. No, we don't want to tell our children that no more. Help them discover who they are as people, and go get that education that helps you fulfill in that thing that you want to be in life, not to just get a job and survive. We can't have that. And that's why you said the STEM programs, the trades, people can get kind of those kind of jobs, man, and have a great life with a great income having a trade. Not everybody wants to go to college. Not everybody wants to go to school, but you can go and get these certificates. You can go get these trades and utilize that to fulfill what you want in life, man. And those are the things that you talk about. The male, man, the father is the foundation of that family, man. And if he's already broken, before he becomes a father, it just keeps perpetuating and passing. So the healing's not done. And I had to do my own healing, man. I had to get to this point in front of you, that I had to go do that work and realize that it's my turn.
Man, that is very powerful. I'm glad you said, because I'm trying to get these conversations together. I got a new co-host that's gonna be coming on. We have some real powerful conversations, getting both sides. But you know what you said is very powerful. We have a lot of black males who are broken, wounded, and we got to build that confidence back up. But as we start approaching Father's Day, we're gonna have a lot of men conversations.
Yes.
We have a lot of men conversations. We got to build our brothers up, because our brothers are wounded. Their spirits is down. They've been busted down. And again, I think you hit it right on the head. Like, we're suffering in silence.
Yeah,
we're suffering in silence. But again, the power of all of this is going to take brothers like you, me, to be vulnerable, to talk about the pain, the anxiety, the depression, the things that we went through. so that they feel comfortable to speak up. Every time
Exactly.
a male has spoken up, some kind of way they've been shut down. And this is why I always have this conversation with the women of the community. When a black man opens up and communicates to you and becomes vulnerable, please don't use that to weaponize angry, because that's it. We're going to send them back, right? So, you know, we got a lot of conversations that we're going to be talking about. We got some relationship conversations that we're going to have. It's going to be a number of things, man. And no one's perfect.
No.
Things happen. You know, we wake up one day and we feel like this, and we wake up the next day, we feel like that. It happens, right? But in this process of building up the males in our community, it's going to take some powerful brothers. It's going to take some leadership. It's going to take some organization. We got to drop some of these egos. We got to drop some of this egos, right? And we got to move things forward. But definitely, man, you know, I know it's getting late up in here. Don't want to hold you up too much longer. Just want to say, you know, thank you. You know, one of the things that I want to start off with, black man to black man, is acknowledging each other, right? We have to start telling each other that we support and love each other. And I think that's why I kind of honed in on Senator Booker's conversation to the sister, because he told her, you know, you are worthy of this. And I think as black men, you know, we have to also encourage other black men when they're doing things. We can't be hating. We can't be in competition. We just got to tell other black men, like, brother, you are worthy of this. You deserve this, and empower this. I've been blasted. Listen, 42 years of my life. I got this award for our organization, but I got it. It was another brother from an organization. Now, I've been doing all kind of things. I received all kind of awards, but 42 years of my life, this is the first time I received an award from another black man, okay? And people is calling me asking, are you serious? I've had women, white men, different organizations. People acknowledge me. People give me, you know, different certificates and things. But this is the first one that I've got from a black man in 42 years, right? Wow. And what I want to change, not only just about the award, you know, it's about, I don't want to let another day go by that I walk by another black male and I don't acknowledge him. I don't uplift him. I don't inspire him. I don't say some encouraging words to him, even if it is persevere, don't give up. Brother, you got this, right? Trying to eliminate some of those stereotypes and some of those negative narratives, man. I've been doing it every day. And one of the brothers who got an organization, man, we've been really, every time we see each other, embrace each other and hug and say, I love you, brother, because our young brothers need to see that. Yeah. And we need some of the elders in our community that are 40, 50 years old to stop acting like young folks.
You put me in an elder, man. I'm 52.
Look, I'm getting up there. But I, you know, a brother said this yesterday, and he was just saying how we still got brothers 40, 50 years old out here still trying to be in the streets, still trying to be hustlers, still trying to keep up the same old, right? And if we want to move our young brothers, we're going to need some of our elders to let go some of their ego, let go some of that trauma that they've been through.
Yeah, exactly.
And unite the community, man. And we got to start doing it. We are in a crisis in this country right now. And our young black boys, they need positive males in our community. And again, this journey, and I keep hearing brothers like, I'm trying to first get all of this together. Listen, right now, while you getting together, it's something that you can say that's going to impact some of these young brothers.
Exactly.
We ain't got to be perfect. We got to get out of this realm that everything has to be right. It's called give what you got right now, because that one word, that one quote, that one testimony might
tell the truth.
Yeah.
If, you know, we because of those disappointments, right, that happened early on, especially if you're disappointed in your dad, right? So if I'm disappointed in my father, how can I be your friend? Because my fear of disappointment comes from the first man that I'm supposed to love and trust, who he disappointed me. But again, we don't realize that. Go back and ask your father, hey, what was going on when I was little? What was going on before I was born? What was life like for you? And then you would hear, when I heard my dad finally tell me what it was like for him when he grew up, I was like, well, no wonder. So I could no longer be mad at him about that. right? Because it was something that he dealt with growing and being raised by my grandfather. Well, no wonder my grandfather was post-slavery. He had a mentality of upset and frustration and pissed off with people. And he passed that to his children. But I had to realize that that's where my dad got it from. It wasn't because that's who he was. It was because of the generational stuff that was passed to him. And so that, I could no longer be disappointed in my father. All those disappointments disappeared because I realized that they wasn't disappointments. That was just my dad doing the best that he could. And you have a lot of, again, you talked about it. Look at the social ills, even the social ills, right? The guys and women who go to prison, a lot of them talk about they're disappointed in their parents. I just wanted my dad to care. I just wanted my mom to care. Like, they're going to prison because they feel like their parents didn't care for them. That's we can correct that. We can correct that early on. I don't want you to wait. Like, I was 40 years old when I figured that out. We could teach that at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. You can be free from that stuff early. But if we don't correct it, if the parents don't know, aren't educated on how to make those corrections, all of a sudden, oh, what happened to Faron? Oh, he's shy. Well, Faron don't want to talk to you no more because you disappointed Faron. So I have nothing to say to you no more. So where's it? Oh, he's in his room. Well, just last week he was bouncing around and all over here dancing in front of everybody and hanging out and talking. Now he's quiet? No, he's not shy. He lives with parents who don't pay attention to him, who don't acknowledge him. Like you just said, who don't listen, who don't, hey, I got a question. Because I said so. Go to your room. Like, you can't talk to you. Controlled by dominance. It doesn't work. But that's how this country was built off of. That's the mentality that we live from. I'm going to control you and I'm going to dominate you. Well, the Bible says we were created to control and dominate together. So again, the mentality, all these things, man. But the men, that is something that I feel that I have a voice in because of how I had to go back and heal with my own parents and my father, who was the core of that conversation of me being a man and how I viewed it and how I learned from him. So I treated my daughters the same way he treated me. It was corrupted. But that's how I was raised. So I guess that's how you raise kids. No, we can make those corrections, but it takes confidence. It takes courage. It takes a level of healing. It takes going back and having these discussions and realizing that your story about your parents is not the truth. It's your truth, but it's not the truth. And when you hear their version, you're going to be like, wow, I had no idea you was dealing with that, Dad, Mom. That's the stuff that we have to have those conversations so that the Bible calls them strongholds, right? The bitterness, the betrayals, the shame, all those things are conversations that we can reconcile so that people become free. And now you can figure out who you want to be in life, right? And not even get a job to prove to my family that I can do this. Like, that's even, when I heard that you can be resilient to the way that it's detrimental to you, like, I thought resilient was like a good thing. No, you could be too resilient that you disconnect yourself because you're so resilient that you have to survive. Like, you got to be kidding me. And then when I discovered that, I was like, oh, well, mine was responsible. I'm a responsible guy. I would take on a whole lot of stuff. But when I realized the difference between being responsible and being committed, it changed my whole perception because I'm not committed to everything. I'm responsible because I proved that, but I'm not committed. So I had to start letting stuff go. But I was putting myself in situations that needed a commitment that I couldn't commit to, that I wasn't going to commit to. I had no intentions of committing, but I grew up to be responsible. So that was part of my character. But separating those two and realizing that, okay, and I could be okay with not being committed, I found peace. And these are the things that we have to start conversating with our young men and our women, but our young men, because we're men, so we could speak to the men from our testimonies and our experiences and give them some space to just be heard and not pretend.
Man, very deep stuff, man. I do this work with those young brothers that I work with that's locked up every week.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, man, the pain, just the pain. And that's why this weekend's conversation is so important about mental health and suicide. You know, when we talk about substance abuse, and I hear young folks that's locked up talking about why they get high, and hear them say, I get high to get overdose because that's the ultimate high. But I'm fighting the pain. Yes. And this is what we just talked about earlier, that silence, man. It's deep, man. But, you know, we get our young folks to write letters to their parents. They've got kids and they don't even know their parents' real name. Do a bio. Find out about your people. That's why I do these things. And people think I'm nuts, but I be in there making these kids do all these different things. I even make them write their obituary. I tell them, listen, write your story. Don't let nobody else tell the story, because when it's over, don't let them lie on you. Don't let it tell the story. People think, why you got these kids writing obituary? Let them tell their story so they can see one thing. One, your life's too short. You ain't got enough yet. But two, you can see some things. I said, don't let people get up there, because I'm tired of going to funerals and the pastor's up there lying. Lil Ray, he went to middle school and that was it, right? Like this accountability from the males in our community, especially our leadership. When we got these situations with gang violence, things coming on in our community, we need our leaders, the male leaders of our community, our pastors, our clergy. Tell the truth, man. Tell the truth. When we got the young people ear, let's tell the truth, regardless if it hurt. We got to start telling the truth, man, so these young folks stop believing the lie.
Exactly.
We know little Pookie was out there robbing, shooting, and killing. Let's stop getting on the news talking about my baby was innocent. Yeah, you just know he just shot 4 people last week.
Exactly.
Like, we got to stop lying in our community, because those lies are just hurting our communities, man. And I'll be frustrated, man. It's like, come on. You know,
gotta tell the truth. We gotta tell the truth.
Play victim when something goes down, but we ain't quick to hold the person accountable, hold the community accountable when something going on. And it's like, that's that stuff that we gotta stop, man. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it's hurting us, man. We gotta tell these young folks, man, look, your little buddy was out there robbing and killing. This would happen. He in his casket because he thought he knew everything. Like, this is what we gotta talk to the males in our community, man. And we gotta stop this lying, man. These pastors in the pulpit, lying at these funerals. Oh, he was a good kid. Now, you know he wasn't a good kid. Yeah. Everybody in the church know what he was doing out there. But we in there talking about he was a good kid. He never wanted to harm anybody. Yeah. And then we start telling stories when he was a great student in kindergarten and first grade. What happened in middle school? What happened in high school?
That's where we lose, and that's where we lose them. We lose them from middle school. We lose them in middle school because that identity starts to change, and that acceptance should be accept to our peer, that peer pressure, that peer acceptance. And if you don't have a foundation, if you don't have the ability to communicate and listen, our children get caught up. And if you're not in sports or in some club at school, you're gonna look for that acceptance in a gang or a predator or whatever, and that stuff is real, man. And so, again, I'm with you in those conversations. They have to be had, they have to be addressed, and we have to tell the truth. There is freedom in telling the truth. There is freedom and peace in telling the truth. And we can teach our culture, our people, how to be responsible with no fault or blame. Like, that's a different way of listening. That's a different way of being, when you can be responsible with no fault or blame to anybody. Because if you really be honest with yourself, you know what? Yeah, I could have did that differently. I could have said this differently, but I said it because I wanted to be right. Right. So now you want to be right. That's what you talk about ego. Well, I'm right. I want to be right. I don't want to look bad either. So I'm going to be right. Even though I know if I'm wrong, I'm going to be right so I don't look bad. But then you still end up looking bad because people recognize your ego. People know you're not telling. Like, all these things that you're talking about, we have to have that space so people can be okay and hear stuff from people who have had experiences and be like, yeah, you don't want to go through that route. These are the consequences. We can show, hey, these are some of the consequences. Do you really want to go down that route? You got 10 people who just gave you the consequences, which were 10 different consequences. Do you want to create number 11, or do you want to learn something new and become a different kind of person so that you can create something that's going to give you, a fulfillment? But
yeah, I mean, and again, it's just, nobody's perfect. And I always tell folks, nobody's perfect. No. We all make mistakes. I'm not perfect, but I think, we gotta really, the reason why I'm saying we gotta talk to the black males, the elders, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, because the young folks is watching this. And I'm telling you, I do this work, man. The problem is the adults.
Mm-hmm.
We the problem. Like we gotta heal before we can help our kids. I'm in these communities, man. These brothers out here, they doing things that, and then they working with the kids. They selling dope, working with the kids. They selling weed, working with the kids. They, you know what I mean? It's just we gotta deal with our stuff as adults, and we got a lot of work. Nobody's perfect, but it's like the messaging, man. The kids is like, why do I want to listen to this person?
we forgot when I speak at church and I speak to the youth and the parents, I'd be like, to the parents, did you forget that you was a child too? Did you forget where you came from? Like now you want to be protective, and all our parents, all of our parents, each generation, they just wanted us to turn out. That's all my parents was concerned about, that their little son was going to turn out and have a life. And they protected me the way they best that they knew how to protect me. But what happens is nobody considered what Faron cared about. Nobody asked, what are you worried about in life? They didn't ask me what I was worried about. They just was worried about what they was worried about. And that rebellion, right? That's where that break in communication, because you're not listening to me. And your child will probably tell you, Mom, Dad, you're not listening to me. You're not listening. And you might be telling, no, you're going to do this, you do this, but you're not listening to me, right? The child wants to be heard. The child has their experience. They have their own worries and concerns. But a lot of times as parents, we put our concerns on that child, and then that child leaves us and goes to that peer. And we know what peer age get us, trial and error.
Man, very deep. Yeah, we got to do that work. You know, that's one of the things I'm working on, is like we got to get a parenting guide for black males. You know, I didn't get a parenting guide that said father, but I know enough mistakes. I know enough things that I did wrong that we want to put together so that we can educate our young males of the community who have young kids and just empower our community. But it's been a great conversation with you.
Let me end this because I want to tie this together.
Go ahead.
The stuff that we're talking about, we started talking about sickle cell trait, right? This whole conversation affects that community because they're people, right? So now you imagine living with a disease or a gene, and you got to deal with life issues at the same on top of that, right? And so these are the conversations that we have to have as people, not because you got the disease and this is your separate. No, you're included in this conversation because you're probably dealing with some emotional stuff from your generation. Like I have friends when I interview people from sickle cell, I feel like I'm a burden on my family. Now tell me, how can you grow up as a child thinking you're a burden on your family because you got sick and they can't have the party or they can't go on the road trip because you got sick? Do you know that child carries that like a burden? And now they grow up. And now how can I have a relationship with someone when I've already said I'm a burden on people? Like you can't be free to have a relationship if you think that you're a burden. But when you talk to the family, they'll be like, no, there was never a burden. But the perception of that person that lives with that condition or disease, their mind tells them, well, you're a burden on your family. But then they wonder why when they go to the hospital, there's nobody there to help them. There's no support there because they don't even have the courage to ask their family anymore because they said no the last time. No is not forever. You have to give a person an opportunity to say yes or no. Can you take me to the hospital? I can't take you. It doesn't mean I can't ever take you. It's just I can't take you. But we don't want that no. And again, the mindset of how can you then create a relationship when your experience is I'm a burden on my family? That's going to be in that background. That's going to be a part of that conversation of your life experience. But you're not a burden. But we think that we're a burden on our people. So that's enough. That's enough to take you off your trajectory of your whole life. That's like 2 + 2 is 5, and you've been counting money for 40 years, and you off by 1 because you've been calculating that wrong, and you've been thinking to yourself that I'm a burden. But I want this relationship, but I can't talk to her because she ain't gonna like me because I don't want to be a burden on her. And you never gave that person the opportunity to care for you. Like these are the things that you talk about, the other impacts of sickle cell. Like those are the other things because it's the human part of that also has to be dealt with while living in pain, while managing your health.
Wow, that's deep, brother, man. I mean, that was deep. Glad that you said that. What a way to end this segment. Faron, we got to have more conversations. I'm definitely going to reach out to you. We're going to get some more brothers. We're going to get a panel of brothers out here, and we're going to hash it out because I think you're right. We got to be vulnerable. We got to talk about it in public. We got to show public display as men, embracing each other in love, not on nothing, because these brothers, oh, none of this. Man, listen. I love you, brother. You my brother. And I think we got to do that, man. So we're going to put something together and do that. But community, want to give a shout out to all my brothers out there tonight. The Baby Y, the Black Man Group is out enjoying each other. I wasn't able to make it tonight because of the show. Just want to give them a salute because there is some brothers out there trying to come together, bonding and doing some things. So shout out to the Baby Y. Shout out to the brothers over there, Corey and Shaman and the rest of the folks that's out there enjoying each other. And then to our community, this coming Sunday, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to dig a little deep into this mental health and some of the things that's going on to impact our community with Rafiki Coalition. We're going to talk about some of the suicide, some of these mental thought process, some of the things that our young folks are dealing with when we talk about what's pushing us and driving us, some of this pain, some of these things internally that is impacting them and leading them into a path of suicide and mental health issues. So we're going to have a powerful conversation. We're going to continue to do this work. We got to walk together in solidarity. As Faron just said, you don't know what kind of support people need. Be there to support them, uplift them, be a part of that journey and that process. And again, be open and willing to let people in to help support and uplift you as well, because sometimes we go through things, we push people away, but we have to be open. We have to have the humility and compassion in our community, especially in these times where high stress, high anxiety, high depression, dealing with just the things we deal with on a day-to-day. I mean, this gas is enough to make you go a little nutty, man. I'm just saying, the gas is high. Yeah, I go to the gas pump and I'm going, why? I'm ready to call the police and say, man, somebody robbed me. This the gas. But again, we dealing with a lot, inflation. Some of the things that's happening across the world is also putting anxiety on folks.
Exactly.
There's a number of things that are also impacting our community. You talk about COVID and just the things that are going on. People are traumatized to take their masks off as the mask mandate is coming down. There's a lot of psychological things that's going on. The war is in your head. But again, as I always say, you have to take the chains off your brain so that you can have that peace. And that love that you need. So we know it's tight. We're going to continue to be there. I hope to see you all this Sunday for our Sunday conversation with Rafiki Coalition. It should be a great one. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope this information was helpful to the community. Thank you, Brother Faron, for coming on. Thank you for your service. Thank you to all of our military folks out there for your service to our people and our community. We thank you so much. Have a blessed evening, everybody. Have a great weekend. Be safe out there and enjoy the great weather that we have coming here this weekend.
Peace.